Well, welcome everyone. It is Tuesday. We're a little bit early, but we're here at 6:30 and ready to pop off today at the Legacy Project, and we're at number 35 today. I've got a special guest on, and he is a longtime friend already, man. Hard to believe. He's part of my men's group, the Alchemists, part of the community called the Rising Man Movement. We have Ryen Cosgro, and he's just got a great story about adventure, going through adversity, and I'm excited to share some of his story today because he's been on many adventures, going across the PCT, attempting to row across the entire Atlantic, and still tries to push his body no matter what, and is an ultra runner as well. So thank you for joining us today, Ryen, on the Legacy Project.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we're honored. We all met about probably 3 weeks ago, and Albert was telling me about it, and I was a little unsure. I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about, and as our story unfolded, as we started talking, and one of the things we talked about this on the pre-call. One of the things that I love about these conversations we have is every man, every woman, we all have a story, and unless we tell our story, no one really knows. They make up stories for us. And one of the things that I loved about Ryen is that he has an incredible story about adversity. And those that know me, I think wonderful. I think I think we're put on this earth not to just enjoy the pleasures of life, but really we're given these equations that we're supposed to figure out about each other. Giving these tasks, we're given these we're given a blueprint of ourselves, and we don't get a choice. We're handed life, and some people have it easier than others, and some people have it harder than others. But in the end, I believe our lesson in life is to figure out that equation. So, one of the things I wanted to kind of start out with, Ryen, is that give us a little bit of background as far as just a brief background about not so much your childhood, but what's one major adversity that you had to go through that really, I would say, changed your perspective and changed your life, if you want to call it, for the man that you are today?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a really easy question for me to answer. And I loved how you said change my perspective. Like one of the biggest life-changing event at 15 years old, I had a pair of scissors go through my right eye in a freak accident. It was like super Final Destination. I in history class,
Wow.
trying to be helpful. I collected up these cheat dividers, that like so you can't look at your neighbor's paper when you're taking a test, and just went to set them on the back counter and kind of dropped them down. There's a big bowl of scissors, pair of scissors hanging off the edge of the bowl, stack of folders, clipped them, and they came flying into my eye.
Wow.
And from that point on, like not only did I lose vision in my right eye entirely, and I missed about 2 years of high school, was in and out of surgery, and after each surgery, I had to lie face down on a massage table for months. For the first month, it would be after each surgery, it would be 24/7, aside to go to the bathroom, and my retina kept detaching. So the idea is lay down and the retina stays stuck up. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a huge defining moment of my life that have had so many ripple effects that I've began to unpack. But that's created immense change in my life.
I know that I've heard that story a handful of times now, and it's so crazy to me how much you just knowing you now and like what you've been through, and then just reliving that moment of like having to just stand still and not being able to like go and do what you want to do for that long, and still you didn't let that define you. You made sure that you progressed. You still became the man that you wanted to be. You still wanted to share your story. You still wanted to go do the things that probably most people after that type of accident would want to do. And so I think what I've learned, even just from hearing your story a couple times now, that it doesn't matter what the accident is. It can be a part of your origin story in some form or another to define that next portion of what that is, because you're going to have to adapt whether you have an accident or not. You're still going to have to go through something like that too. So it's just, I think for me is like, how did you ever feel like you were like down out of life like during that time? Can you like drop us in like some of those hard times that made you continue past it? Because a lot of us go through that in their day-to-day mundaneness, you know, and like literally doing nothing for 2 years will be draining for someone, but you still manage to not make it who you are.
Mm. In a lot of ways, it made me who I am today. And I just going through that and being so isolated, like I was an only child already. So, so I was used to having some time that sets the background a little bit, but I was used to having that solo time. But coming from being a sophomore in high school, swimming, playing water polo, surfing my brains out every chance I could get, and having that all ripped away from me was really tough. Like I remember sitting at one of the doctor's offices and saying like, "Is this gonna be fine? Like, can I go on my surf trip this spring still?" Like, like I didn't have the perspective of how bad it was. Like it was gradual. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. Like I didn't realize, hey, I'm losing my sight in this eye forever, for months. So the gravity of how bad of an injury it was and everything that I was going to have to go through, it was gradual. And kind of the rock bottom was just being alone, being isolated, and not seeing my friends, and trying to understand like why is this happening, and, and realizing that I have the power to change this experience based on my attitude, because I could get horribly depressed and I was sad. Like it fucking sucked.
Not that.
There's no beating around it. It fucking sucked. But I started looking at like I think this happened to me and for me for a reason. Now what can I get out of this situation, and changing the narrative of why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
That really changed it for me.
So on the narrative, so I'm a parent. Okay, both of you guys aren't parents yet, right? You're not a parent yet, right, Ryan?
No, no.
So from a parent's point of view, I'm curious. Usually in, we'll call it tragedy or adversity you went through, parents do two things. They either coddle you more or they withdraw. What happened with your parents, and how did that dynamic change in your relationship after this incident happened?
Mm. I've had a lot of questions asked about this. Nobody's ever asked me that question. Mm.
I got the chills, bro.
Mm.
Whew.
So my parents were divorced. They split up when I was about 4.5, and they co-parented pretty well, and they both really rallied behind me. The first surgery that I had at UCLA, which was my third surgery, they both came down together. All three of us stayed in a hotel room. It was kind of awkward, but they really rallied behind me. I don't feel that I got particularly coddled, but I felt through that very supported. Um, and I did see a lot more softness and compassion from my dad, and a part of him really open up. And I felt like that, in hindsight, I've never even pinpointed it till this moment. Like that is really when our relationship began changing.
Man, I got the chill. I got one more question. I got the chills, dude. Thank you for sharing. And I noticed something. I noticed that question kind of got you a little bit. I'm curious about what happened when I asked that question.
Hmm. So much gratitude. gratitude, man, so much gratitude for the support I had. Like I felt so isolated through that, but really recognizing I did have quite a bit of support through that. It and that made it easier. I don't I don't think I would have been able to handle it and had my own revelations and change of perspective if I didn't have that support.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing because did you, they obviously, so it sounds like they came together a lot more, right, during that time frame and were always with you. So, like, when you were growing up with this change in dynamic, and then afterwards, did you feel like you guys could all come together? So growing up, were your parents? I'm just curious now. Were your parents like able to like coexist with each other? Because I know co-parenting is one thing, right? But also like being a part of your life, especially as a single child, that's very difficult to nurture and to make sure that like you still have that presence. Was it was it a lot easier knowing that they were going to be behind you, like throughout this process of you like having to heal and rehabilitate and like learn how to function with this new style of learning? Like, how did you go about that? Like when you transitioned out of that moment?
Mm. Yeah, so I've got kind of two parts of that question. To address the first part, like when they split up, like that was for them individually, and that was a decision also to not fuck me up
Mm.
the best they could by not raising me in a toxic environment. And so they would show up together or both be there for my major things, birthdays, sporting events, you know. So they coexisted peacefully enough to be able to support me and both be there for me through all my major events growing up. And so this was no different, but it was.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was. Um, and what was the second part of that question you're asking? Like, how did they show up kind of coming out of that?
Yeah, well, what kind of popped up for me too while you were talking too is like I feel like it's not really talked about where like how do you go about maneuvering in a relationship with your parents that you both love and they're individuals, right? And so clearly they made a decision for themselves to want to separate so that they could be themselves, right? Um, but then afterwards, like how do you manage to like be your own self in this? Like was there a certain part, I think my question is actually shifting now, like did you notice your tendencies and traits like shift as a person coming out of this new like gift that became you, you know, but isn't you at the same time? Like it's a part of you, but it's like, did you like feel like you have to transition for them? Like how did you go about that, like in your relationship with them coming out of this?
Yeah, coming out of the injury and all of the recovery, it was less about me being a certain way for them and me being a certain way for me.
Mm.
Like really taking ownership of what the fuck do I want?
Mm.
Like, you know, that injury gave me the perspective like I could die. Like I could be amputated. Like something could happen. The scissors could have gone in further and hit my brain and I could have been a vegetable, you know? So it's like, what do I want to do in life? And I want to go do it. So, so it really started first just searching, like, what do I even want? And I starting to identify those things and then start to take them on.
Yeah, bro. I love the rabbit hole we're going down. So let's fast forward now, right? So the adversity happened, and I believe we all have this turn back moment. Like you can go back in time and say things. I made a decision here. I shifted here. For me, mine was 2019, November 2019. I knew because where I was in my room drinking a lot, and just incident happened, and I was like, "There's just no fucking way I'm gonna be like this anymore. Like I'm done." You remember that turn back moment for you? when this adversity happened, when you got through the actual recovery process, where you're like, okay, this is the new me. Do you remember that day? Do you remember that incident? Was there an aha moment? You're like, I'm now going to take this gift and I'm going to exponentially tenfold this motherfucker. Do you remember that?
That tenfold moment happened the day I came out of my 4-day vision fast.
Oh wow.
Woo.
So I did that fast at what I've been
I think
20
I
years
think you
old.
told me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was
So
that Al?
4 years after the incident, that's when that aha moment came.
Yeah, nearly
Okay.
5 years later. Yeah, and it felt like that incident kicked the door open, but that aha moment happened coming out from the desert and realizing like I had so much fear around being alone in the wilderness, not eating. Like
Yeah.
not eating was such a big deal. Like not eating for 4 days, especially at that age, at 20, like just being super active and eating so much all the time. Like that just seemed like such a challenge. And realizing like I thought that was going to be so hard and it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like what else am I capable of? If that seemed to be so hard, what else am I capable of? And the day I came out of that fast, I decided that, you know what, I am going to hike the Pacific Crest Trail.
Wow.
What I was looking for the next challenge, kind of like as a young man trying to push myself and prove what I'm made of just to myself for nobody else but to myself is like, what's the next challenge that I can take on?
Dude, that's epic. I know it just got me reminding me of like when I was about to do the fast too, and everyone, I don't know about you, but like for me, everyone was tripping. My dad was laughing because he did it before me, right? Everyone was like, especially my mom and stuff like that. She was like, "Are you gonna like die from this? Like, are you know that you're gonna be doing this?" And I'm like, I mean, I've seen there's been at least 100 people or close to 100 in this community. Like, obviously it's doable, but it's just funny like what people say when they hear you do something like that too. I didn't know if you like shared this with everyone else as you were going into this, or if you went solo 100% and just went like monk mode and quiet and stuff like that too. It got me remembering to that moment when I was deciding to do that.
Mm. Yeah, I had shared it just with my close circle, both my parents and just a couple close friends. And my mom was really worried. Like I ate so much and I was still like pretty thin and super lean. So she was worried that I was just going to come out skin and bones. Like she knew I'd be okay. She, through some of her friends that started the Condor Clan, like that's how I got introduced, was through some of my mom's friends. Uh, so she knew I'd be okay, but she was really worried and like wanting me to eat a ton. It's like, you got to eat a ton going into this because you're going to be so skinny. And I was fine.
So, you know what's interesting is since we're on that topic, so I
Oh,
relate.
it's
I
fine, don't worry. Yeah.
relate to a lot, Ryan. You know, the bottom line is, I remember when I went through my fast, I broke my leg 2 weeks before I went. Actually, my anniversary was last Thursday. Actually, last Tuesday, my anniversary, when I broke my leg.
Wow.
2 weeks before I went. And I went there because I had to go. I told Albert, I had to go. There was like, I had to go. And that severance that I went through, that was my calling of, are you serious? Are you really going to make these life changes? And I remember when I left there, it was the hardest thing I ever did because I did it on one foot. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I came out of there with the whole new vision of the man you see today. Like I really came out like I didn't have a chip on my shoulder. I had a vision. I was a victim before. So when I came out, I came out really, I wanted to write a book. That's where the book idea came from, by the way. The book idea came out of the desert. I wanted to start a men's program. I wanted to give back what I learned to people. So my passion really came from that desert experience, because before our call, we talked about it. Like I went in there with 99 problems, realized 95 of them I created. Because when you don't have food, right? What's the only thing you're thinking about in the desert? Fucking food. That's the only problem you have. So I got a whole new perspective of, I'm making things way too difficult. I'm worrying about way too many things. Like the simplistic things is, I'm alive. I can survive. I can survive by myself. I don't need anybody in my life coddling me, taking care of me. And it gave me this vision of, I can do more, and I'm playing really, really low level. Like I wasn't even hitting my capacity yet. I was playing very small in life.
Right.
So the today was born from the desert, but I realized I was playing so small that I had to stretch myself like farther than even my kids could even see me, because they weren't talking to me at the time. So I really, like you said, I did it for me, but the byproduct was getting my family back, writing a book and speaking, all these other things. So it's just amazing that you went through that as well.
Mm. It's a really common byproduct of that experience. Everyone has their own experience, and that makes hearing your story through that makes me just so happy that you got to experience that too. Like
The
it's
big people tell me is, my kids tell me is that I'm calm. I'm way more calm. Like I'm not, and part of it was, again, I was talking to a friend of mine. My ego was so big. You probably haven't noticed. My ego's big. My ego is way bigger. But when I broke my leg, I'm out there with other young men like you, and I was one of the oldest guys there. I was humbled like a motherfucker. Like I couldn't participate. I couldn't, and so I had to depend on other men. That was the first time. That was the first time in my life that I had to depend on another individual to make it through the process. I never relied on anybody, because I couldn't most of my life. Everybody disappointed me. So that experience gave me the one word I got out of that, the one word that was taught to me by men was compassion. I learned the word compassion in the desert.
passion.
Mm.
I love that. And you breaking your leg, that happened for you so that you could experience that.
1,000%, dude. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
So the funny story I told Albert is, literally before our journey, I didn't listen to any of the videos that JD had. I didn't do any of the projects. I was going to go do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Literally, I broke my leg on a Thursday. I had surgery on a Monday, but that weekend I listened to all his videos, learned about severance. I'm like, fuck, severance literally happened to me. I literally severed my fucking leg. It was a great experience for me, because had I not broken my leg, I wouldn't have gotten, quote unquote, the medicine we talk about, because I got to experience what it really meant to find that man that I was looking forward to being, or to find. I had to find him, because my ego was overriding so much. I'm just going to break through. I'm going to break through. I had to learn how to just step the fuck back. I had to learn how to trust other men, and I had to learn how to ask, which was really hard for me. Ask for support completely. So it changed the whole dynamic of my life.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too, just to echo it on before we transition, is like that's when I noticed Ryan too. Is like I noticed a complete shift in the way my dad was oriented his life too. And like you said, I think you're less
Yeah,
reactive. I think
yeah,
not just less
yeah.
reactive, and I think that was what was really critical for our family, and for me to even like want to trust him, because I think going back just the whole idea of like parents and stuff like that too, we put them on a pedestal for some reason. And growing up, I didn't know how to interact with them. I thought they were my dad, they were mom and dad, right? And so I was trying to figure out like how, when I go to college, like how do I be my own version of myself and not just be the kid in it, you know? And after that, I saw him completely humble himself. I saw him realize like, oh, he is human too, you know, and he is my dad. He is human. He has to go through something like this, and then the stories that he shared afterwards of just embracing it all. That was really cool to witness as a son, because I didn't know, I'd never heard of anything like this before. You know, I never heard of someone wanting to willingly put themselves through starvation and come out of it and what that would look like too. So that was an incredible experience just to witness. And now that I'm a part of the community, it's not, I wouldn't say it's normalized, but I can understand why you need to go through something like that in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, with that being said too, I was so you mentioned that being the pivotal moment for you is going through your own fasting experience. I mean, I've talked about this with you too, with like the PCT trails and the rowing. Just a quick little snippet. Obviously, you realize like you can do anything you want with your life. Why did you decide to do those things? Out of like two of the hardest things ever to push yourself in that, and when you're older.
I think as a kid, like as a little kid, I had such an adventurous spirit, and like I was such a dreamer too. Like when I was home and when I was by myself, I was always imagining myself going off on adventures. Like at one point, I remember stealing all the steak knives and packing a backpack with a sleeping bag, and it was like, I'm just gonna go off hiking. And I think I was like 7. So I had like so much adventure like in my bones. I don't know where it came from. And as an adult, I realized like I can do whatever the fuck I want. I'm gonna go on these adventures. I'm gonna live out the fantasies that I've played out in my head and go do big things, go do hard things. And like the PCT was very much a decision. Like I had an idea that that's something that I want to do at some point, and I decided to do that. Going into rowing across the North Atlantic, that was not on my radar. I knew one of my close friends, Chris, that was something that he wanted to do, and he had talked to me about that off and on. And he called me one day out of the blue. Was like, "Hey, do you want to row across the North Atlantic? Like, I found somebody who's doing it, and I'm joining the crew, and they need somebody else." And it took me 10 minutes. I hung up the phone. I was like, I'll think about it maybe. And like my whole body was lit up. It was the tail end of COVID. So like life plans, like I wasn't in the middle of a career. I had been working seasonally. It was like, this is the time. Like, this sounds incredible.
Yeah.
And prepared and lived in New York City for a couple of months, in the back of my truck out of a camper that I just built at a marina, like right next to our rowboat. And we left and we did the thing.
So a lot of the times, Ryan, when people look at us, I'll put us all together. They look at us, right? They look at the three of us, and we're talking about these stories of adversity and overcoming them. They think that we have it figured out. They think that everything's fine, right? They think that everybody that because of this and that we've figured it out. No, we haven't figured it out, but we're more aware and we figured out more than most. So as a man, right? I know I struggle every morning. I call it the Hulk. I wake up with the fucking Hulk every morning. Like, I want to fucking everything every morning. I just wake up like that. I've had this. I have sleepless nights. I can't sleep most of the night. The stuff I still go through, and I have a process I go through to ground myself. I want to call it, right? And so my struggles are still. They have to do with self-esteem, self-worth. They have to do with sometimes being enough or being too much or this imposter syndrome. I deal with. I'm 52 years old. I'm 20 years older than you guys. 25 years older than you guys. Even though that incident happened to you, and you're farther in place in life that because of this gift you got, what are some struggles or frustrations that you are still dealing with as a young man, as a man, that you're still trying to figure out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the biggest pieces is recognizing one of the biggest shifts that I'm going through now is, recognizing that I'm not okay all the time.
Right.
Like, I learned as a skill and a coping mechanism, like through that eye injury, to everything in a positive light and put a positive spin on that. And I'm in the midst of unpacking that and not bullshitting myself. Like when I don't have my shit together, not putting a veil on it. Like and just really viewing myself in its totality, like viewing it in all its imperfections and shining light on it, and on the same side of the coin too, of like shining light on the things that I have done, because I can also be incredibly hard on myself.
Yeah.
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 See,
Right, and that's common too. I think we've all done that, where we look at a number, like how old we are, we look at what other people are doing, and it's not necessarily the right energy to put into that, but there's some internal clock that we put on ourselves to be at a certain point. And I guess we all have our own way of, like you said, coping with it and feeling like how are you going to deal with something like that when it keeps popping up on you too? And I think that's the biggest thing that we can all measure, is realize like you have to do it your own way. You have to figure out what are you going to do to wake up in the morning? What are you going to do to calm that beast inside of you, but still scratch the itch that wants to like be unleashed?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think what you said perfectly was like, you're going to have that with you. And something that we talk about a lot in Alchemist is like, you have those shames, you have those guilts inside of you, and how do you integrate that? So my question is too, is like, is there something that you've learned about yourself that you like to integrate, for someone in their mid to late 20s that could possibly get some medicine from?
just speaking purely from myself and my what I'm going through is integrating anger, integrating rage, like having a space that you can move that through. And for myself, that's really just been allowing and accepting myself and feeling anger and feeling rage at times. And for me, that looks like it's either like I'm out surfing, the waves are big, and I'm just scream, or like go for a drive and just yell, and like have move that through my body, but just allowing myself to feel those feelings of anger, as I think I really repressed anger for a long time under the veil of positivity.
Yeah, that's brilliant, man. Because you know what's interesting is we'll go down that rabbit hole a little bit. Is many people don't understand that anger for men, it's a necessity. It's an emotion. It's a survival skill. Back when they were saber-toothed tigers, we had to be able to build this anger, this force field, to really turn our fucking eyes upside down so we wouldn't be scared in the moment, to protect our families. And that's where that rage and that anger is there for. Unfortunately, we're in the 2020s, where we're not fighting saber-tooth tigers anymore. We're fighting just humanity itself. And anger is looked at for men so badly. I'm not saying it hasn't been abused. What I'm saying is that people don't understand, just like women use crying as their way of expressing themselves, we use anger. That's our mechanism of expressing ourselves. They're the same energy. It's the same fucking energy. It's just a different emotion, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you said that, because it's really important for men, specifically men. It's okay to have emotions. It's not okay to be emotional. There's a difference. We're in the space of, now by yourself, absolutely fucking let it out. In front of other people, in front of other women and men or children, no. This is where the man part of us that we're never taught. I was never taught this. I was taught to express my emotions like a fucking little bitch, because my dad did that. And so, but I never learned how to control my emotions and then have an outlet. You know, the best exercise I learned, bro, check this out. I did this coaching class I told Albert this 2 years ago. In 2020, bro, I've never cried so much in my life. I never had so much anger. I was so fucking mad at myself. I was so angry that this coaching thing I took in 2022, we had this anger release thing we had to do. We had to yell and scream and hit shit, right? We've all done it before. And I remember telling the coach, I go, I'm not angry anymore, Beck. I don't want to cry. I don't want to get mad. You know what she did? She said something brilliant. She's like, do a happy release. I'm like, what the fuck is a happy release. She's like, you've accomplished a lot in life, haven't you, in the last couple of years? I go, yeah. She's like, aren't you proud of yourself? She goes, dig into that emotion. So I did for the first time a happy release. It was the same energy. And I was on the fucking foot. I was hitting shit and I was yelling, but it was from a place of, thank God I got my son back. Thank God I got my kids back. Thank God I got my life back. Thank God I'm fucking still breathing. Thank God I changed my life forever. That happy release, it really allowed me to do two things. Number one is anger can be very lethal if it's used the wrong way. But also happiness, those energies, they're in the same playing field, just like love. It's what we do with that anger that makes it detrimental, right? You go surfing. Some people yell and scream. Some people do it by themselves. So really glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people have this misconception what anger and rage is.
Yeah, it's so looked down. I don't know if I would share this with you or not, but I played with anger as an emotion 2 years ago. I don't know. It might be a broken record, but I was like trying to resolve this fear and shame of anger, and it was very difficult to get around. And I still have it from time to time, but it comes out when I get competitive, and I really want to just like do whatever I can to put my best effort and try to win. But mostly it's for myself to say like I did my best at this point in time, and so that's where that energy comes from. But I noticed that like I think it was like 5 years ago, I had like this really strange like phenomenon happen where like the only way I felt like I could get it out was by playing sports or by working out. But that made me feel trapped. I didn't know what I needed to do to get rid of it. So about 2 years ago, I like I started looking at like a lot of athletes and how they deal with anger and how they use it in sports. And some of them, Derek Jeter, he talks about he'll write down everything that someone says, what they wear, how they said it, in what setting. Michael Jordan did very similar, and I think he would also, I think he said in his documentary, he would create lies to kind of motivate himself too, whatever it was to get that edge, right? And so I did something similar, but I did it with my friends, which is not always the best. But I mean, I guess there's close people in my life, so to do something to kind of to spark something, and I was just wanted to just flirt with the idea of like, how do I use anger to my advantage? Because I wanted to use it as a toolbox, right? I wanted it to be like a hammer, and then happiness to be kind of like a saw, like I think of them as tool belts. You have to use them for a specific thing, and if you try to do it for something else, that's when we see the worst of the emotions come out, right? So I was doing it a lot for about a month and a half and 2 months, and once I got a little bit past the 6 week mark, I noticed it started to become a little bit detrimental towards my like friends, because you can only do that for so long intentionally. But I just thought it was a really fun little experiment to understand what it meant for anger for me, and not feel bad about using it, because I felt so much shame around being angry or being mad, because a lot of times we hear it now that it's bad to be emotional, unless it's in sports. That's like the only way where it's fine to actually use it, and it's okay and encouraged at times. But it's just strange, like how we try to push away, but it's because of the destruction someone has seen from it, right? And so now it's a fear basis to run away from it or demonize it. So I thought that was cool that you brought that as a tool for you to utilize in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, and to integrate it safely. Like I think as men, we either really avoid being intense and angry outwardly because we're so afraid of hurting other people and repress it, or we're kind of coming from the other side of the coin where it is so expressed and we have to dial it back in its outward expression, and just playing with anger and being comfortable like expressing it. It's difficult to feel comfortable like sitting in it and letting it out, and finding those outlets to do so it's a game changer. Yeah.
How do you use it with personal relationships? Do you let it come out? Because I know you're a very calm guy in general, right? Does it come out? I know you have a girlfriend. I don't know how much you want to disclose, but Does it come out in those things, or with family or with friends? Do you feel safe in those environments to practice some of that stuff? And how do you do it when it comes up?
It's just speaking, looking at my relationship with my girlfriend, just in that container. Yeah, it definitely comes up, and it's been a huge learning for me to be comfortable and feel safe in actually expressing, like, hey, this actually kind of pissed me off, or it didn't sit right. I growing up, I think I really held back and didn't want to rock the boat, especially with my dad. So I would just keep my cards close to my chest and not say what was on my mind. And so being in a relationship, that's such a pressure cooker of emotions, and it brings up so much that only being in an intimate relationship can really expose. So really learning to be comfortable and be safe in actually expressing that, it's a huge point of growth for me, even in the last like 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, we got about probably 10, 15 minutes left, and we always like to ask this question. So is there any questions that you have for Albert and I? Is there any curiosity you have between us and what we're doing, or things you've heard or kind of witnessed that you'd like to ask?
Yeah. So this question will be for each of you from your own perspectives, but through, because I do know a little bit about your guys' journey and what you're building and growing. So for Albert Sr., what would be some advice you could give to other fathers to young adult children on reconnecting or connecting on a deeper level in this new phase of life as the kids, you know, fully into that next phase and that relationship's changing?
Yeah, that's a softball fucking question. So thank you, because Albert knows my. You know, honestly, a lot of men don't. I'm not going to say they like what I'm going to say, but it's the truth. What I had to learn as a father, it's my responsibility to really mend my relationship with my kids. That means, A, stop treating them like they're 9 years old anymore. A lot of parents have a hard time allowing their kids to grow up and seeing them as a 26-year-old man and still think they're 12, 13, 14, 15 with this hierarchy that I'm your parent and you're the kid and I know more. The biggest shift for me, and a lot of it had to do with failure. I lost my family for a while, just so you know, right? I lost them because of my actions, of my inability to control myself, my drinking, my anger, my fears, my frustrations, my fuckery. It was my fault. So in order for them to be safe around me and trust their dad again, I had to change how I not only talked to them, but received their answers. I no longer started giving advice. Albert, used to give advice all the time. I started asking questions. I started saying, "How can I support you? How, do you want me to?" One of the things I asked is, "Do you want me to listen to you? Do you want me to be a sounding board? Do you want me to ask questions? Do you want me to give advice?" Like I started really parenting how I wanted to be parented, and I think a lot of fathers have a hard time with this specifically. We'll talk about fathers because I don't know. Mothers are always nurturing, but mothers have a hard time. But as a father, is really if I want a connection with my son, I have to share my dirt. A lot of fathers don't want to share their dirt or their past because they don't want their kids to judge them, not knowing that that dirt or that chink in the armor is what they need to hear because it makes them more real. Like, I'm a real person. I'm not your dad in this holier than thou life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me to really surrender the ego, for me to really divulge and be vulnerable to a point where my son knows everything about me, whether he liked it or not. And he at one point in time he was like, "Dad, that's too much information." He was open about that, but he needed to hear it, and then he got to absorb it at his own pace as he started seeing his dad in a different light, because I wasn't just showing off or just telling him. I was telling him so he could see the life I had, and he can make choices for himself based upon the mistakes and or the path that I went through. That's why I did that. So to answer your question is, more fathers, more parents need to stop being parents when they turn in their 20s and start being advocates and ambassadors for their adult children to help them through their journey so that they can follow a path either that's similar to them that's good, or help them with their own path with the things that they learned that could help them proceed farther in life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there are so many nuggets in there. I love that.
Tell me what you heard, and we'll let Albert speak. What did you get from that?
I think one of the things that I heard that really stood out was asking, like, do you want to be a sounding board? Do you want advice? Like, allowing the space for in that relationship, what do they actually need? What do they actually want? You
Yeah.
know, and that really being a shift from parenting. And I see, like, in all relationships, like that, just that alone can have such a difference, but especially as a father-son dynamic shifting, like that was a huge nugget. And offering, not only like, hey, you can go down this path, but hey, learn from my mistakes. Like, take the best from me, and also the things that you didn't like, look at that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And for Albert, I kind of have the same question, but like, as an adult, how would you give advice for somebody else to build a connection with their father?
Yeah, my if you would have asked me that 8 months ago, 9 months ago, I would have thought just to put yourself out there more, which is, yes, you have to. I think I've seen more with some friends and talking with my dad too. Is you can, it's just like any relationship you want to mend. If they're not ready for it,
Yeah.
it's hard to do it. And as we were answering this last question together too, it was like, what's the difference between a parent and just a normal relationship with asking for support? It's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the parent has to relieve that stress of like being top dog, being the person up front. So that's the only difference with the parent, I think, versus any other relationship is if you're in a if you're in a romantic relationship, at least it's like 50-50, in terms of there, for the most part. Brother, sister, same thing. But with the parent and a kid, there's this weird little dynamic that happens, especially with the father and son. We have to destroy your father figure in a sense and become that yourself. But if they aren't willing to let go of that,
Mm-hmm.
there's only so much you can do. So you can be there and show up.
Yeah.
To get the real connection, it has to go. I think the parent really has to want to be a part of it, because I'll be there.
Yeah.
But it won't be the same. And I've seen that through a handful of other observations with other people in my life, that they want to be there for their parent, but they don't know how to. And um, as a child, I think it does help with showing how proud you are to your parents, especially with a dad. Um, I think that can help facilitate it, because I think a lot of times our parents want respect and love, at least for the father, but you won't really respect something that you don't actually respect. It's kind of like, how are you gonna force something on someone to feel this natural love that's there when they don't feel reciprocated, don't feel like their parents are proud of them. If it's always like demeaning, it can be very intimidating to want to be that open. So it's a hard question to answer with that one, just because I think there's a little bit more variables being the kid.
Yep.
So that one's a hard one, I think, to really discuss in truth, because you don't really know all the way.
Yeah.
But it's a good question to ask, because I'm sure as kids, a lot of kids have that question, like, what can I do to have my parent love me more? And the truth is, you can just show up for them, and but they have to want it just as bad as you.
So
Yeah.
I'm as a kid, okay, because I'm a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a father, I have a mother. My dad's not in my life, Ryan.
Yeah.
Right? And I think said on the pre-call, like, I told Albert this, if he would reach out to me and say, like, I want to mend things, I would be on a plane tomorrow to go hang out with him. But he doesn't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
Because by him doing that, and now because of the work he hasn't done, now he has to admit, he has to be accountable, he has to be understanding, non-judgmental, not of me, but himself.
Yeah.
I'm just the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of men, doesn't matter if you're 30, you're 40, you're 50, 60, or 70, if you as a man haven't gone through that process of this self-reflection mirror of everything that I've done in my life is my fault. What happened to me, my fault, good and bad. That relationship will never work. And my mom, on the other hand, wasn't part of my life. And what she did brilliantly is 2.5 years ago, there was an incident where she divulged some stuff to me, and I fucking blew a gasket, dude. I was so upset because I was a hurt little 5-year-old kid that came out. The best thing she did, dude, she didn't say a word. She didn't validate herself. And because that happened, I felt safe to where I called her, went to see her, and now we talk once a week because she's willing to not be my mommy anymore, but a mother figure, a friend that I needed. I don't need a mom anymore. That ship is fucking sailed.
Yeah.
But I will invite a female friend who's a mom figure who would like to be in her son's life as a grown-ass adult, not as a mom. I think that was the best thing she ever did for me.
Mm.
And so it goes back to what Albert said and what I said, is the parent always has to lead.
Yeah.
If the parent doesn't lead, it ain't gonna happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I'm really hearing and getting from both of those answers from you guys is the parent needs to do that inner work. I mean, everybody, man and woman, but everybody needs to do that inner work to be able to receive and deepen those connections.
Amen to that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And it's difficult to look at yourself and have that mirror held up.
So difficult.
It is really tough. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful for you guys to see, you, Albert, to see your son be that mirror, your family be that mirror, and you step up to the plate and see your guys' relationship totally shift.
Yeah.
And I've been able to go through something similar with my dad too. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. It means a lot to one, you've seen part of my transformation and through this being one of the lenses. So it's cool that you're a part of it. You're the first alchemist too to be a part of the journey. So thank you for taking time out of your day. The biggest thing I got out of this experience was it's just a conversation, right? It's just a conversation, but there's so many fun stories that happen when we're just truthful to each other. And it's just cool watching other people in their lives succeed and fail and push through life. And then the questions that you asked too, I think are just, it makes me realize like how far I've come too. So it definitely grounds me a lot more. Having this every week is just special. So thank you for coming a part of this. What's the biggest lesson that you got, Dad, before we close off?
Oh my God, guys. Thank you, Ryan. I'm glad you came on because we've been looking for men like yourself or in Albert's age group that are making changes. You guys are so needed in this world. Just where you're at, your outlook, the confidence, the responsibility, the duty you guys are holding. And the biggest thing I got out of this episode is we are on the right track, bro. Albert, we are on the right track. We are bringing really some beautiful people on this show. you get to share stuff that people are lacking right now, and they need to hear more. They need to know that you're going to have adversity. It doesn't fucking matter. We're human beings. You'll get through it. Every one of you out there is watching this. You've had something happen in your life, and guess what? You're still here. You got through it. You can get through it. And so I got of this is just the just thank you, Ryan, for the experience, man. I really love what you brought. Yeah, thank you. What about you, brother? You got of this?
I mean, first and foremost, just gratitude for the container that you guys have created. Like, this is such a special container as a father and son, and having seen Albert get to grow, being a part of his same men's team for over 2 years now, and just seeing the growth and transformation, and being able to have these conversations and bring more and more of this to light to a bigger audience is really beautiful. And seeing the mirror that you guys are for both of each other makes me really, really excited to keep growing that relationship and shift in dynamic with my own father. Really excited.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. That's one of the reasons why we started this, is to mend relationships, to put it all out there. Because that's what we had to do. We had to share what was really going on, and we've been there. We've been from ground zero. We've been less than zero. It felt like at times. But yeah, now we get to reap the rewards and share this type of stuff with everyone watching, with you, and we just don't know who's watching that could change your life today with their relationship. So thank you. I'm honored. And for everyone watching, we're here every Tuesday. So thank you so much for stopping and taking time to do it. If you have any questions, we would love to answer them. You can comment during the show or afterwards. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Legacy Project. And with that, we are finishing and signing off on episode 35, Adventure Calls with Ryen Cosgro. Everyone, thank you, and good night.